Hello, and welcome to possibly the first evening edition of Through the Pages. I recognize now there are no windows in this frame, and it probably doesn't apply because I have the same light bulbs shining at me. But it's evening. It's different. There's a different mood in the air, which feels fitting for this book. So, getting right into it. Shakespeare and Company, History of the Rag and Bone Shop of the Heart. So this is basically a full history of Shakespeare and Company, the bookstore in Paris. Get a little picture of look at all that culture. So this is basically just like, it's not a straightforward like book, so it doesn't even, the person who put it together, Krista Halverson, doesn't list herself as the author even. It's like, says she's the editor. And so it's snippets, kind of going by the decades, but like, again, just all the beautiful photography. So one of the big chunks of it is that this bookstore, for those who may not know, is kind of a hostel of sorts, that people can stay there, especially if they're writers, and can kind of work a 4-hour shift, stay for a while, but George, his quota is you have to read one book a day, which is just like, God, I wish my boss were like, did you read a book yet today? Stop working, go read. Like, that's the dream. But so the other requirement was that you had to write I think it was a 2-page autobiography. And so there was, as they kind of went through the years, the history of the shop, those were dispersed in as well, along with photography, along with clippings from newspapers and other cultural magazines and stuff like that. And then, all the journals that George kept, things like that. Then his daughter comes into the mix later on. And it's an interesting way to tell a story, and I feel like to do just a straightforward, almost like novel style, like just like her biography style, like it would feel a little bit like it lacked luster, I think, when you're talking about a space like this that is such a, Bohemian's an understatement, like carnival of a place. Like, it just, this was a fantastic way to get to know it. There was another book that I read on this subject about a man who lived in it, and both of these were a gift from the same person. She was my mom's best friend, so I hold her dear. She has a connection to in that way. So, but this Time Was Soft There by Jeremy Mercer. So it's his story from living there for like 2 years, I think. So that was an interesting perspective, but it also, in the scope of a decades-long business that turns people over like crazy, you have that narrow window, and like even though 2 years is quite expansive, it's very refined and a little slanted. But so this, I felt like, was not her reporting on it, more just like, this is what we have from that era. Put it together, make it pretty, do what you want with it. And so I think this was a better way to understand it. If I found another book on it, or if Annette gives me another, I will certainly read them and kind of see how that falls into the mix here. But I do think that whether you've even been to the bookstore or not, or plan to, like, I just think this is culturally just an awesome thing. Like, if you're watching this, you probably like bookstores. That's enough, honestly. Like, so if you happen to see this big old thick book out there, it's more than just a photography book. There's a lot to it. It kind of reminds me of this from Jay-Z. A straightforward biography would have been kind of boring. But he did it in this way, where there's all these pictures and lyrics and things like that. So, with such a kind of multicultural approach here, being that they weren't just in there selling books, they hosted poetry readings, they were pushing it, and they were weaved into the community, and they were very much respected. I will usually don't do spoilers, but I don't think it's so much a spoiler. And if you've watched this far, you're probably a Shakespeare and Company fan to some degree, so you might already know this story, but there was a great comic in here depicting when basically the shop was open in kind of two capacities. Way in like the 30s, 40s, lady owned it. Then World War II, it got brought back. But there's a World War II story in here that is just probably the happiest World War II story. The happiest I've ever known. But, so, Hemingway fan, if you can make out those books behind me, but he loved that bookstore, was a part of the community. Sylvia meant a lot to him, the woman who ran it at the time. And it got, it was in a part of Paris that was occupied, that Nazis ruled it. As they began to lose the fight, they were getting surrounded. And who stormed Paris and came to liberate the bookstore? But Hemingway, depicted in this cute cartoon here. So he went back and personally, as this story goes, got Sylvia out, or was about to, and she said, hey, there's people on the roof. Gunfire, no more Nazis, came, got Sylvia, and they went. They raided the cellar of some like fancy hotel for champagne and like had liberated the bookstore. But to like storm the beaches with troops and know like I'm going right to that bookstore, like that's the fucking coolest thing ever. Like honestly, like I don't think war is awesome, like all the violence, shoot, like that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying in those circumstances and Nazis are controlling this bookstore and Sylvia is being held hostage, like boom, like going right to it. Like that's fucking heroic. And so this has a lot of tidbits. I will not say there are many on that level. That's an echelon you don't hit a lot. But there were so many little insightful things. And if you like any of the writers that were around in this era, you'll pick up little personal things about that are just hysterical and help build a very real picture of people when it's like how they were described, like hanging out at parties and stuff, not their stage persona, not like what's written about them in a way that's meant to make them more famous. Just he was around that day. Oh yeah, he always ate a lot of breakfast, like the weird shit. Like that's what I want to know. And so this was very insightful, not only for the bookstore, for the people who surrounded it and made it what it was. So yeah, odd book, but phenomenal book. Odd store, phenomenal store. Thank you for watching.